Welcome, everybody, to this meeting of the Wingecarribee Local Planning Panel. Can I start by asking all present to switch off their mobile phones before the meeting begins, and to advise that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledges the Gundungurra and Dharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call the Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respect to elders both past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today. We have no apologies received for this meeting, and we have no declarations of interest by any of the panel members. Item 5 on the agenda is to do with planning proposals. Item 5.1 has been withdrawn by the staff. Item 5.2 has no speakers, so we will move straight to development applications. Item 6.1 is DA 24/1319, the use of the existing dwelling house as a group home transitional at 2 Manor Rise, Bowral. So I have a list of speakers here, and first on that list, speaking against the proposal, is Philip Altman. Could Philip Altman please come forward?
Just to clarify, I'm in support of the council's recommendation to refuse the application.
Yes, against the proposal was the way I put it.
It was a big decision for my wife and I to move to East Bowral.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt you. Can you just tell us where you are located physically in relation to the site?
Yes, I'm across the road at 8 Kimberley Drive.
Thank you.
It was a big decision for my wife and I to move to East Bowral 5 months ago. My wife lived her entire life in Sydney, and I lived for my last 60 years in Sydney. We were delighted to find a house in a beautiful, quiet, and purely residential area in East Bowral. But to our shock and horror, we found out a significant commercial rehabilitation operation involving more than a total of 20 staff and clients was operating at 2 Manor Rise, as judged by the website advertising for Highland Recovery. Furthermore, this commercial operation located across the street from us was operating illegally without council approval. I could not believe it. But please let me make it clear, nobody here is against drug and mental health rehabilitation. What we are opposed to is the inappropriate location of this commercial facility and the precedent this would set for the whole of Bowral and other townships. To cut a long story short, in response to widespread community anger, I helped establish the Bowral Action Group to specifically oppose the Highland Recovery DA. More than 100 local residents have joined the Bowral Action Group, many of whom are here today. And they believe, and I've been sending regular status updates on the DA process to them. They've attended community meetings. They have pledged funds, and we've joined together to express our view about this development application. It is our opinion that the DA is based on deception. Highland Recovery is not a group home, and the operators have not been truthful about the potential serious adverse impacts on local residents. Furthermore, the drug abuse and mental health facility, as previously mentioned, has been operating illegally, and in our opinion, the operators have treated council authority with total contempt and disrespect. This does not augur well for the future. If this facility is given the green light to operate, if past performance is any guide, the nearby residents of East Barrel might expect there is worse to come if this facility seeks to expand further.
Thank you. Can I just I'll stop you there? We need to limit.
I have
speaker
one
to
more
3
sentence.
minutes. So if you can round up, there might be some questions from the panel that
Sure,
we could have some dialogue, but
sure.
please finish up. Yeah.
Okay. There is no shortage of suitable sites to locate a rehabilitation center in the Highlands. But what we are saying is that Two Manor Rise is not one such site. This DA deserves to be rejected. That concludes my statement.
Okay, I'll ask the panel if there are any questions or comments in relation to this speaker. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. We go down the column or something? I think the next on the list is Mark Walters. Do we have Mark Walters? No?
I just thought I had to fill in the paperwork to present, to attend. But I.
If you want to speak, can you come to the front? Speak to the microphone. And I've got you on the list here, so
Yeah.
3 minutes, please.
Oh, this will be about 30 seconds.
Good.
I've been overseas, so I was aware of what was happening before I left. And when I got home, saw the paperwork, I thought I had to fill it in, so I was able to attend the meeting, that was all. But having said that, I wholeheartedly agree with what the gentleman mentioned before, just that we're not saying, there's no objection to drug and rehabilitation, we all know that, we all understand that. It's more about, is it the right location for that to occur? And in our opinion, it is not. I would have thought somewhere out in the country where you've got the fresh air, you've got space, an ability to try and help these people without being right in the middle of a community. I would have thought the council planning would be all about getting the appropriate place in a suitable location. So, you know, you wouldn't put a resource centre in the middle of Bowral. You wouldn't put a market garden beside an atomic reactor. So they're things that I think the council should be looking at. And we just feel that it's not the appropriate place, and there is a chance that something may happen down the track. And we feel as residents we'll be there to wear it. It may be a slim chance, but it could still happen. And at some point, somebody will say, crikeys, how did that happen? Oh, the council let that happen. When was that? Oh, 10 years ago. So to me, there's not as much accountability there as for the residents who are going to be there all that time. So I just think there is a more appropriate place to have the facility located. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Are there any questions from the panel or comments? No, thanks very much. Next I have Anne Ryan. Can I remind speakers that there's no need to reiterate what's already been said. If you agree with the previous speaker, just say so, and there's anything else you might want to add, please say so.
Thank you. My name's Anne Ryan, that's my husband Paul Ryan. We live at number 1 Manor Rise, which is about 30 minutes from the facility. 30 metres, what did I say?
There's space, not enough.
Oh, God, sorry.
Please proceed.
So, look, I just want to mention, if I can, I'm a qualified counsellor and case manager, and I've had many years' experience working in drug and alcohol myself. So, again, what the gentleman said, they are needed in appropriate areas. Today I want to address the potential safety and security issues around the private drug, alcohol and mental health facility proposed in our residential neighbourhood. The potential for theft of property or crime is significant. The clients may resort to theft to fund substance use if they were to relapse. Clients experience severe mental health issues, are in crisis and can lead to aggression or unpredictable behaviours. These can escalate quickly if they're not managed adequately with appropriate interventions, thus posing a safety risk to our community. Unauthorised exits can also occur if a client is not fully committed to the program, and this could lead to criminal activity to procure funds for their addiction. I and many of the residents in the area would like to walk in our neighbourhood. We'd like to walk our children, our grandchildren, and walk our dogs. Unfortunately, this facility is in what we call the cul-de-sac. So Manor Rise is the cul-de-sac, Kimberley Drive is the cul-de-sac. There is one way in and one way out. So we have to pass this facility every time we go for a walk. Anyone in crisis is extremely stressed, and at any minute a client at this facility could exhibit abusive or threatening behaviours to ourselves or our children or our grandchildren. You may think I'm overly worrying. As I said, people in crisis can experience aggression and or unpredictable behaviours. There is only an open metal fence between this house and the road, meaning we can see everything in their garden and everyone in the garden can see us. To this point, I'd like to mention that the facility specifically states on their website their treatment of sex addiction will be offered at the centre. Research findings from the Department of Medicine at the Kalenska Institute states that around half of those afflicted with this addiction also have some sort of sexual deviation that may be illegal, such as pedophilia, exhibitionism, and paying for sex. Lastly, I would quickly like to say, only last week I was reading a research article that came out of Wollongong University by Dr. Colin Corty. And what he's saying is that the medical workforce, nurses, for example, we have the lowest number of nurses per capita in our regional areas. Worse than the metropolitan area and worse than isolated communities. So what we're doing is this facility will be taking our nurses away from our healthcare, from our aged care delivery, and this private facility could possibly take our nurses away from assisting the local community. Thank you.
Thank you. Panel, are there any questions or comments for this speaker? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Yvonne Springett. Can you introduce yourself and tell us where you're situated, Yvonne, in relation to this facility?
I live down on Mansell Road, just around the corner from Manor Rise. I am for the rejection with council of this DA. The people speaking today against the application to establish a drug and mental health rehabilitation centre have no trust in the investors and operators of this commercial operation. And with respect, we suggest that the local planning panel should feel the same way. The reason why I say this is that the owners and operators of the facility have treated the council with total contempt for their authority. The rehabilitation centre is operating illegally without DA approval. The centre has not responded to legitimate council concerns about sewage, rainwater, building appliances, noise and fire safety. And the centre has not ceased its illegal operation despite council requests to do so. The DA application is for a group home which is both deceptive and not permitted under the existing zoning regulations, and the operators are planning to defy council and go straight to the Land Environment Court with their application. The residents simply do not have the financial capability to fight this application in the Land Environment Court. In the meantime, the owners are continuing to operate, leaving piles of rubbish in our streets. A meeting was held with the administrator appointed to oversee the council, Mr Viv May, to discuss the outrageous behaviour of the operators of the centre, but council have so far failed to shut down the illegal operation. The residents of East Bowral want to make it very clear, we are not opposed to rehabilitation centres, but we are opposed to placing a rehabilitation centre within purely residential area. Put simply, the proposed commercial operation should not be at 2 Manor Rise. The clients of this centre will have potential serious mental health issues, potentially serious drug addiction issues, and may be associated with concerning antisocial and violent behaviour. The operators of the centre may say these clients will not be supervised or restricted in their movements among the nearby community. This is a deep safety issue for us. Let us not be fooled. This is not an operation that is expected to provide community services. Given the advertised facility charges up to $25,000 per week, the clientele will not be local people. It is obvious to all that the owners and operators cannot be trusted. They have not shown goodwill, nor have they been shown to be people who respect local community. If this facility is approved, we should all fully expect the operators to continue to flaunt the local council regulations, and they may even expand their business without required approvals. This is a nightmare scenario for the residents of East Bowral, and it sets a dangerous precedent. We plea to the LPP to protect our environment and our safety by rejecting the DA application.
Thank you, Yvonne. Before you leave, are there any comments or questions, panel? Thanks very much. Graham Rich. Would Graham Rich like to come forward? Do we have Graham Rich? No? Not present. Next, I have Gordon Towell. Is Gordon Towell here?
Yep.
Gordon, have a seat, sir.
Thank you. So
Can you tell us where you are in relation to this proposal?
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
physically?
So we live at 3 Kimberley Drive. So we share around a 170-metre border which runs all the way along the back of Two Manor Rise. Look, so many of the points I've got here have been discussed, so I'll try not to repeat them.
Thank you.
But that said, you know, we are here to represent a lot of people. As my colleague mentioned earlier on, over 100 people are against this proposal. And we've been asked to try and make as forcefully as possible the views of those people. You know, it's been fiercely opposed by local residents. There's been a significant number of calls, letters, and emails. But I'd like to perhaps highlight and just reinforce one of the points in particular. And it's the disingenuous methodology by which the owners and operators have approached this. Despite having no planning approval, because I share this border and I'm right next to them in terms of where they are, where their tennis court is and so on, the work that's being carried on there has been unbelievable. You know, work been there till 11 o'clock at night, which I had to raise with the general manager. So building work's been going on since April. You know, additional bedrooms, bathrooms, gym facilities. It's just gone on and on and on. And in parallel with that, vast amounts of vegetation have been removed. You know, none of this should be acceptable. And that's some of the things we've been highlighting to the council. It's absolutely in total disregard of local residents, council, the local area, and I find it astonishing that it's still able to operate despite all of this. It's also clear that the overseas investors have no interest in what we're doing here. This is not, let's be very clear, this is not an application to help local population of Bowral or Southern Highlands. This is for people who can afford $10,000 to $25,000 a week. These are people who are being flown in. Check the website and have a look what they're offering in terms of that. It has nothing to do with the local community. The profits, without doubt, will be repatriated. So that's something I think has to be made really clear. The DA application was always flawed. It's profoundly misleading. It talks, originally it was about seniors housing. It's also talked about being a transitional group home. Well, that's nonsensical. It's absolutely nonsensical. It bears no relation to what the purpose of this facility is for. And it profoundly misled also the local residents in that area who had no idea to start off with about what was being put forward as a DA. It's only more recently that people have gone, my God, what on earth is this about? Because there was no mention of it in the original DA. So I think it's fair to say that their statement of environmental effects, the zone planning group, in support of the DA is also incomplete and inaccurate, which has been highlighted elsewhere in some of the council documents. The zoning regulations simply don't permit this type of facility in residential areas of Bowral. That's also clear, I think, to certainly any layman in the area. It's prohibited by the Bowral Development Control Plan. And as has been mentioned elsewhere, Two Manor Rise is wholly wrong as a location for this. It's a tiny little cul-de-sac. It's one way, there are very few houses, and the traffic that's going backwards and forwards there. Someone also mentioned the rubbish that's strewn up and down the streets. We have photographs if there's proof needed of that. So it's not right. You know, we're a small community of working families, retirees. We don't want it in that street. It's wholly inappropriate. And indeed, I can also tell you that the general manager, Cameron Francis, said to us when we first heard about this that he himself didn't think the 5-acre property was the right way forward, and that he had proposed a 100-acre property, which by bizarre coincidence happened to be where I used to live, in Moss Vale, which is a small farm.
Can you talk, please? You've gone past your 3 minutes. Can you wind up for us?
In summary,
Yes, please.
I would request that the panel forcefully reject this, shut the facility as far as humanly possible, and put the house back to what it was before the developers got hold of it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any questions before this panel, this person sits down? Any questions or comments? No. Okay, thank you. Brian Hayden, will you come forward, please? Take a seat. 3 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. I live at number 3 Manor Rise, which is across the road, and I think I'm the longest standing resident in the street, our little 5-house street. I've been there 18 years now. And I expect the council and the zoning system to protect us from pollution, industrialisation, subdivision, security and safety threats. And this proposal, which was explained by the chief executive at a small gathering when he first wanted to launch it, he said it was going to be something to do with trauma and wellness. And I asked him straight to his face, does that mean drug rehabilitation? And he, oh no, no. So this denial and lying has been an unfortunate factor in this. Anecdotal evidence that I've had from other people where they've lived in a neighbourhood where a drug rehabilitation centre has been installed. This evidence shows that it can be very, very disturbing to neighbours. And I'm focusing on the drug rehabilitation part of this. Things like screaming in the middle of the night, people wandering down the street and having to be shown back to their facility. The stashing of drugs in neighbours' yards or houses. The robbing of people's houses to get money. I imagine that the price of this would be Daddy will be paying rather than drug addicts, but they have been known to become very poorly behaved. I'd like to point out too that our little street of 5 houses has no footpath, no lighting, and no sewerage. So all those things with people wandering around in the middle of the night are a bit disturbing. The other thing is the precedent this could set. If this was accepted for a change of use, I can only think of the awful things that could happen in other houses around, not just in our street. I think the precedent is a big worry. And it will completely change the nature and the atmosphere and our community feeling in this district. And I think the other points have been well made. I don't need to repeat them.
Thank you. So unless there are any questions or comments from the panel, please take a seat. Thank you. Was there a question? Oh, sorry. It's all right. Thanks so much. Finally, Susan Pritchard.
I'm one of the longest standing residents, or John, my husband, behind me, and we have been residents there for nearly 35 years. I'd like to address the environmental concerns that we have about the development that's been discussed, and I'd like to support Council's recommendation that the application be rejected. This neighbourhood doesn't have sewerage, reticulated council sewerage, nor does it have street lights. It was a rural subdivision of 30-odd 5-acre blocks. Each house has either a septic tank or an approved aerated pre-treatment system where the water's then pumped around the garden. These systems are required to be regularly checked by an authorised company, and the results of those checks are reported to council. The original aerated system at 2 Manor Rise was for a single household capacity. Now, given that the website of Highlands Recovery says up to 10 residents, customers, patients, call them what you will, 24 staff, that's not including gardeners or cleaners, and that visitors of patients are welcome, we're looking at around 40-odd people using the system. Whether it's been upgraded or not, we don't know, but what I can tell you is that the system there is not coping. If you walk past in the early morning or in the evening, the stench of untreated effluent is disgusting. This is blown out by sprinklers onto the lawn. So, apart from the dreadful smell and the possible health risks of this, there are real environmental implications because the water that runs off the lawn or seeps through the lawn goes into a small dam. It then runs into a culvert which goes underneath Kimberley Drive, along and through other private properties. It goes under Mansfield Road and eventually joins the Mittagong rivulet, which rises in Milton Park, which then joins the Wingecarribee River, which is part of Sydney's water system. So this untreated effluent is going into the larger water system. Another concern is the matter of rubbish disposal, which is being mentioned. Neighbours regularly see 2 commercial-sized skips sitting out on the side of the road waiting to be collected. They are often so overfull that the lid can't shut. The rubbish is falling out on the road, and of course, cockatoos are pulling it out and spreading it. Apart from being unsightly, it's a possible risk to health, not only of the wildlife, but to people, especially if some of that refuse has been used in medical procedures. In terms of light pollution, there are dozens and dozens of lights blaring all through the night. As I said, we don't have street lights. So whilst this can be confronting and annoying for other residents, it also could be disturbing for wildlife like owls, koalas. We have a resident population, and other wildlife, echidnas, wombats, etc. So I'm sure the panel will agree that for environmental reasons, this is not an appropriate development in that particular locality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Panel, do we have any questions or comments for this speaker? No. Now we have, on behalf of the owner, Mark Pepping. Is Mark Pepping here?
That's the draft one.
No, sorry.
The updated one.
No, we don't. Mr. Pepping's not here. All right.
No, but he's
He
not-
doesn't want to speak?
He's not registered to speak. He's not registered to speak. He's advised that he's not registered.
Okay, he's not registered to speak. Okay. Well, the panel will deliberate on that matter. Thank you very much for your submissions. We've heard what you have to say, and we'll take that into consideration in our determination. The next item is item 6.2, a 40-lot Torrens title subdivision and associated works, including earthworks, construction of 2 roads, and a stormwater detention basin and landscaping at 159 Railway Avenue, Bundanoon.
Can we lead, sir?
You certainly can. Yes, we'll be announcing our determination later this afternoon after we've...
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, item 6.2, against the proposal, we have Tony Abrahams to speak. Please limit your talk for 3 minutes, and then if there's any questions arising, we can discuss.
Good afternoon, panel. I'm in support of the Council's recommendation to refuse this application. I'm the owner of a small farm at 192 Railway Avenue, Bundanoon, which is next door to the development property. I'm also authorised to speak on behalf of 2 neighbours who wish to speak, but one had a medical issue and another one had to be elsewhere, namely Mr. and Mrs. Keith Spencer and of 193 Railway Avenue, and Mr. Michael Belshaw of 195 Railway Avenue. So I hope the committee, the panel, will indulge me if I slightly overreach the 3 minutes, but I'll try not to.
See how we go.
So I'll deal with 4 issues in separate categories. The first being water. By way of a little background information, on January 6th, 2020, our newly restored barn that had been in place for over a century, probably constructed by the Lloyd-Jones family, whom I'll mention in the heritage category, situated directly to the east of the development property, was razed to the ground. It was razed in about 20 minutes at the very outside with 600 degrees of temperature. The principal cause of the fire was drought of sufficient intensity and difference from those of previous decades as to be uniformly seen as exacerbated by global warming. After the fire, the flat ground between our dams and the slope leading to our house was revealed to comprise a substantial amount of peat, which burned spontaneously for a number of weeks thereafter. Those same conditions probably exist on the development property roughly in the same position, that's to say at the bottom of their very heavy slope on the property. A major issue in respect of this development relates to the absence of adequate hydrological studies. Spring Hill wasn't called Spring Hill for nothing. Important underground streams cut directly through the development site in a generally southeasterly direction. The council report pinpoints inadequate mastery of this issue by the developer at this point. It's to be greatly feared that the inevitable interruption of the plentiful subterranean springs through this area will have unknown consequences in both times of low rainfall and times of high rainfall. In times of low rainfall, the development will likely deprive the heavy southeasterly facing slopes, respectively, of the development property and our property of subterranean flows, thus exacerbating fire risk and compromising grazing on part of our farm. We farm a small cattle herd. And during times of higher rainfall, it will likely cause local flooding on the development site. Surely that's not 3 minutes.
I think it is, but keep going.
Promoting overflow into the area surrounding the banks of the permanent stream situated on the eastern side of our farm and on the property situated below us, a former Spring Hill paddock recently acquired by Mr. Jason Hines. Furthermore, there's a strong possibility that the changed flows of the subterranean streams will impact the already existing erosion of the steep eastern boundary of the development site, that is the western boundary of our property. There will almost certainly be increased harmful nutrient content and pollution runoff from the roads and house yards within the development site, it being noted that the surface water must flow into the interrelated system of Bundanoon Creek, the Shoalhaven River, Tallowa Dam, Wingecarribee Dam, and ultimately the Nepean and Wingecarribee Rivers. In short, the steep land with the presence of springs and watercourses would suffer significant disturbance from any construction. This will destabilise the geological formation of the area and contribute to the pollution of the catchment area. RFS consideration, the second category. The proposal should seek to, the RFS states the proposal should seek to provide a perimeter road, and it further notes, noting recent fire history to the southeast aspect of the proposal, further information is required as to how the lack of a perimeter road can be met. There is a never built and unbuildable paper road between our farm and the development property. But one thing's certain, the steep incline of the land bordering the boundary between our property and the development site of the land, the wide natural wetlands running for about 70 metres along that border, and the impossibly rough terrain of the nature of the terrain, plus the stream, permanent stream, flowing along our western boundary and the eastern boundary of the development site, would make impossible the creation of a perimeter road by converting the entirely theoretical paper road outside the boundary of the development property into an actual real road. So if a perimeter road were found to be necessary, where would it be built? Where could it feasibly be built? Only inside the development land itself, raising further considerations similar to those I've already traversed.
Okay, I think it's time to wind up.
Right. Well, third point.
Close to 6 minutes.
Third point is ecological considerations. There are certain lots, 3.9, 3.10, 3.14, that are flood prone in particular. Any clearing of construction areas in the areas of those sites will only not only destabilise the geology but have a severe impact on the wildlife and organisms present. Just to mention the heritage issues, it's quite astonishing how the heritage aspects of Spring Hill, formerly called Lindholm Farm, seem to have been minimised in the development application. I direct the panel to the emails with attached photos, which I sent yesterday to the council officer. Yep. These show a working cattle start and the infrastructure within the curtilage thereof by the Lloyd Jones family about 100 years ago. The heritage items and their significance need to be assessed and considered far more respectfully than the developer seems to have done at this point. There are features on the land, such as a stone bridge and so on, and they haven't been mentioned or taken into account. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Are there any questions or comments? We have visited the site. We are aware of the question of the heritage or significance of the house. It is something that is proposed to be investigated in more detail. That was what was resolved by the panel in adopting 600 odd heritage items for exhibition It's a matter of getting access to that property and having a close look at it to determine its
Going back to
condition.
what I said about being called Spring Hill, I just can't understand how a development application was ever made in a site that's so riddled through subterranean streams.
Thanks. Dennis McManus? So whereabouts are you, Mr McManus?
Thank you, Chair.
Who are you speaking on behalf of?
I'm speaking on behalf of the Heritage Study Group for Wingecarribee.
Right.
And Chair, thank you for the opportunity to talk. And Chair, I just heard what you had to say about heritage too, and I do understand that, and I'm glad that that you are informed about it. But I would like to take the opportunity just to reinforce some aspects of it, because the application itself doesn't touch on heritage at all. It basically said there's nothing to see here. And the council report itself is, in my view, a bit lightweight on the heritage. Now, I understand part of the reason for that. Of course, it's not at the moment a listed heritage item. It's proceeding that way. But I'd like to make some comments, nevertheless, if I may. And perhaps you, the panel, may have some questions to ask of me. I'm actually, Dennis McManus is my name. I'm a retired Senior Heritage Officer from the Heritage Council. I was on Council's Heritage Committee from 2011 to 2020, and from then on, the co-coordinator of the Heritage Study, which went to the council, to the planning panel this year, and to the council now on its way to approval as a planning proposal by the Department of Planning. But the gazettal of that won't happen until probably 2025. There's a separate issue in relation to Spring Hill, which you know of, deferment for that assessment, largely in relation to the curtilage. But our main position, we actually did lodge a submission in relation to the DA back in August. For some reason, didn't get picked up, so I've only just learnt last night or so about this coming to the panel today. The nub of our submission was that the council should not approve the DA until adequate safeguards were in place in regard to heritage. You know, a fairly reasonable request, I think. In regard to Spring Hill, although the applicant, owner, applicant, whatever, indicated, look, there's nothing to see here, the 12 pages of evidence for this in the study related to Spring Hill show the opposite. It is a very important item. And in short, here's the story. It's designed by James Peddle, later of Peddle, Thorpe and Walker. It was built in 1920 for department store owner Eric David Lloyd Jones, one of the David Jones family. James Peddle himself travelled to America in 1912 to qualify as an American architect. He settled in Pasadena, and he was there for 2 years. And what it did was it enabled him to see at first hand what the Californian bungalow designs were. And of course he came back with them. The interesting thing about it, in Pasadena was the firm of Green & Green, who were the main proponents of Californian bungalow, talking worldwide. Okay. And Spring Hill's importance is, of course, it's designed here in Australia by someone who had first-hand experience of California and that development. I'll just speak very briefly, if I may. I realise the time's running. Yep. My comment would be that in relation to the DA, the applicant was fully consulted a year ago about the significance, and in a way it's a pity that that opportunity was lost to not cover the matter in the DA, to address it earlier, and I hope that this will happen now. They did object to the listing, and Robert Stass did not agree to the objection. Robert Stass went on to say that he thought that the item was of state significance. Now, curiously enough, of all the items we looked at, 609 and the recommendations of over 400, it's the only one that was picked up as being of state significance. So it is not just an ordinary item, it's quite an important item. And of course, Robert Stas did suggest in July that there be a detailed inspection of the site, which is what you referred to earlier. In terms of any assessment, a very quick comment would say there needs to be the proper full assessment, including photographic, hopefully all of this being done with the owner, the appropriate curtilage, and of course this is the time to do it. You can't do it, set up the lots later. You should be looking at the heritage aspect first, getting that curtilage right, especially in relation to the garden and the driveway and the gates. And I think also typically you would have, and certainly in this shire, Section 88 controls in relation to what might happen on that site, in addition to any heritage controls, and also 88 controls on surrounding lots. And I'd just like to conclude by saying that although there's this business about that fuller assessment, there's no doubt we're talking about a heritage item now. It'd be disingenuous not to think that. And I think lastly, and hopefully the proponent will take this on board, I think that Spring Hill could be a very important centrepiece for any future development there. I think it could be an outstanding site. Chair, thank you very much. And are there any questions that the panel would like to ask me?
I don't have any questions. I understand precisely what you're saying. The fact it's been deferred for increased, for further inspection, to consider inclusion on the list of items for public exhibition to be included
Yes,
in the heritage
that's correct.
list of the LEP. I don't know whether there's any moves afoot. Are you aware of any moves afoot as far as state significance is concerned?
No, I'm not. And typically that would come probably later. Our first thing is to get this on to the LEP listing, and typically it would just build on that. But there has not been, to my knowledge, any move for state heritage listing.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
And thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel.
So, speaking on behalf of the applicant and donor, I have first of all Graham McKee. 3 minutes, Mr. McKee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and panel members. I'll deal first with the heritage because that seems to be the elephant in the room. More than the elephant in the room, it seems to be filling the room. So the application didn't deal with heritage because, as the council report says, it's not a statutory item. It's not something. Further investigations, Robert Stas said possible. If you read carefully the report, it says possible state inventory listing, but said that it should be, in his opinion, part of the local listing. The proposed development is to retain the building and to give it a significant curtilage. You'll note that from the subdivision plan that there's a retention of the driveway that leads to it. In the report, of course, the engineers are saying, well, you shouldn't do that, you should have just one single road and all the lots feeding off it. But obviously because of the softer subjective heritage considerations and the beautiful avenue of trees that you experienced today, it's something that is a very important part of the entry to this particular building and the historical significance of it as it transitions. The zoning, this proposed development complies with the zoning in terms of R2 component and the C4 component, in terms of the minimum allotment sizes. I note that council says it's not in a position to deal with compatibility with the area that's around, but clearly this particular development is compatible with the R2 zoning to the west, I think, to the west, and then the R2 zoning to the south, and then we've got large lot or rural zoning from which the gentleman here spoke. He's an adjoining neighbour. But in terms of this particular development application and where we're at the moment, we've received obviously the council report a week ago. We're looking at responding to the ecological issues, the bushfire issues, and the water catchment issues that the water catchment guy apparently turned up today on site. And so we provided a response on the 13th of October, so hopefully we'll get something back in relation to that. In terms of the ecology, you saw that this site has been farmed, and it's been in the family ownership for a long time. I think for the last 100 years. They've now decided to divest it. My client bought it some years ago and he's a local and he's very, and he'll speak, but he's very clear and conscious that he wants to do a really good job of this. And they've taken time. The report suggests that building envelopes would be of assistance. I think that's a good idea on development of this nature, to identify building envelopes to ensure that matters are taken into account. In terms of the Southern Highlands shale woodland.
Sandstone shale transition.
If I might just talk about that, and then I'm happy to wrap up. Just in relation to that particular aspect, this application for subdivision, and we all know, and the panel members know, the tension between a subdivision application which is purporting to not take any trees down, and so the issue in relation to tree removal, and we agree with the council report which says that we can identify that really carefully and clearly, is that the APZs, is that there'll be some removal of the woodland, intermittent, to provide for the canopy break that the planning for bushfire requires. We're relatively, we understand that the panel has a very powerful report against it that says we just don't have enough information and we're going to refuse this, and we're content with that. The matters before the court, council will be providing contentions after this panel meeting, just to check to see if there's any other things that the panel wanted to add. We agreed to that course of action. So, yeah, this matter will pursue. But I suppose the real reason we're here is we wanted to listen to what the community had to say, and we also wanted to indicate to the council that we really want to work with the council to narrow the issues and hopefully resolve them within the processes of the court.
Thank you, that's commendable. Thanks for your attendance today. Are there any questions or comments? There is a long list of things that need to be dealt with.
There is.
The court process may or may not be the right way to deal with all of them, but that's a matter for you.
We're confident.
That's a matter for you. I think we have registered to speak Matthew Adamo / Brent Morrison. Are you both speaking, or what? Do you wish to say something?
Yeah, I'll just quickly talk about a couple of things. Look, as I said, I've been a local in the Southern Highlands for 15 odd years.
Now you're Brent, is that?
Brent, yes.
Thank you.
I own properties in Bundanoon, and I've got friends that live in Bundanoon. So I'm very familiar with the community there. I spent a lot of time there. When I heard that this property was coming to the market, and it was before it went public, because it had been in private ownership for about 60, 65 years, I thought, you know what, it was one of the last infill panels that is zoned within that Bundanoon segment.
That has R2 zoning.
It's C2 zoning and C4 zoning, yeah. So it was one of the last infill panels. It was always going to get developed at some stage, and I think most people recognise that. And I thought, if it was an out-of-town developer that came there, chances are it's going to be carved up and it's not going to be a good outcome for the community. So I thought, you know what, it's a good opportunity to be involved in something that can be a good outcome. And I want to preserve as much as we can in Spring Hill in terms of its, ecology and trees and this setting. It's a beautiful setting in there. So we purchased it 3 years ago. So we've spent almost 3 years of understanding the property and doing studies. We've had consultants and they're working on it for 2.5 years. The ecological study took 1.5 years alone with multiple site visits. It's a 300-page report. We've gone to town on really understanding what professionals viewed of each part, whether it was the riparian corridors, the water, the trees, the fire, etc. And we've worked the scheme up around what the recommendations from the consultants want. So we were to try and get the best outcome for all of the different facets of the site. one of the things that I know Anthony has touched on is the perimeter road. And we looked at lots of different outcomes there, and we felt that a perimeter road was not good for the surrounding neighbours. In fact, the neighbours to the southwest, most of the western side, would literally have a road, their house, and a road. So it didn't make sense. I mean, as a resident, I certainly wouldn't want that. So what we've tried to do is the lightest touch in there, but also giving the optimum outcome from an RFS point of view. And that's why we've engaged a top consultant in the RFS field who've been with the RFS themselves to have an outcome for them that's equal or better to a perimeter road outcome. And I will touch on the heritage. As you can see, we have actually designed the estate to take into account the existing property there, given that there are still questions around that. And the curtilage actually covers the entire border of the house and the driveway. I'll happy to have a chat to you about that later on if you want. But it's not something that we've ignored. We've taken it into consideration.
The house and the gardens.
Yes, correct. So I suppose in a nutshell, I mean, it's a passion project. It has to be financially viable, obviously, but it is a passion project and we're trying to get the best outcome. We're not removing any trees. It's the bare minimum where a couple of roads have to go. In fact, we're going to plant we're actually going to plant more trees in the estate. So the net outcome will be vastly more trees than there were when we actually took it over. But we've tried to be really sensitive about what we do. And we do feel it's a really, really good application and a good design and a good outcome for the community. But we're happy to work with the council and resolve issues that they have. We think we've got a good answer, but it's, we're very open-minded. We want to have a conclusive.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? No.
Surely that 6 minutes or whatever it was gives me the right to reply.
That's not the way we run these. It's not a debate. We've heard what you had to say. We're not having a debate here. It's
Yeah, and Anthony, we've had people ground. We've had people.
No. I think you better just sit down.
But we're not removing any of those trees.
Okay, just sit down, please. Sit down. Thank you. I think we've got to just leave it at that.
Yep.
We've heard what you had to say. We visited the site. We've seen your written submissions. We heard what you had to say. I think we've got sufficient information before us to make a decision.
Yeah, and I understand the process that we have to go through from your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think that's the end of the meeting that concerns... Oh, no, we have another speaker. Sorry, we have two more items, 6.3 and 6.4, to do with...
Excuse me, Chairman, sorry. Would I be able to speak as well? Or?
Well, I understood that I've got both names on the list here. I did ask, did one of you want to speak? And Brent said he wanted to speak. So I think we've heard all we need to hear, to be frank with you, and we've seen what we needed to see and read what we needed to read in terms of submissions about this matter. So you've chosen a pathway. That's your prerogative. We have to deal with what's in front of us now, and we will do that, and we'll announce our decision this afternoon after we've deliberated. I don't think it will take too long to deliberate, and then we'll come back online to announce our decision. Okay. Thank you. You may leave if you wish, or you can stay and listen to item 6.3, development applications greater than 180 days to be reported to the panel. There is no speakers for that, so I'll move on to 6.4, development applications greater than 180 days not required to be reported to the panel. We have Barry Anstey to address us in relation actually to both of those items. Sorry, Barry, yes, both of the items. Start again.
Thank you, Chairman of the panel and panel members and staff. I first say that this matter really resolves around the fact that we're controlled by legislation, we're controlled by regulations, we're controlled by directions of the Minister, we're controlled by codes of conduct, and we're controlled by the ability that if people are not satisfied, they can take further action that's available in relation to decisions. This relates to a matter that I raised at the last meeting about a resolution of the Council on the 7th of August that was item 3 of a minute made by the Council when Mr May was the Administrator. I've taken the opportunity since the last time I addressed you at the 25th of September to go back and listen to the live stream in relation to when he made this minute that he made in relation to the item 3 of what he decided put forward. It's interesting that he made the comment that he was putting the sting in the tail of the previous resolutions in the matter, and also that he was according with advice previously provided by the panel, by the planning panel, and also in relation to matters he discussed with the General Manager in relation to performance. Now, based on those things, he then made the minute. Now, that minute, I think, in the report, you've probably got a copy. I just can't put my hand on. So the next question is, where is the power for him to make that resolution? And my submission is that that comes from the Environmental Planning Assessment Act 2.17, Constitution of Local Planning Panels. And 7 of that says the local planning panel is not subject to direction of council, direction or control of council, except in relation to any matter relating to procedure of the panel, right? Or the time at which it is to deal with a matter that is not inconsistent with any directions of the Minister. Now, the point is that the directions that existed at the time that minute was made there was a direction made on the 7th of December 2022, and that direction at 4.4 panel performance, item 3 says, should an application experience unreasonable delays in excess of 180 days from lodgement, the panel chair may require the council to report the matter to the panel within 4 weeks for determination. Now, subsequent to that, there was on the 6th of March a decision by the a direction from the planning minister, which created the fact that it created Schedule 1 of development applications, basically that were to be determined by the panel. Now, subsequent to that, there's a direction on the 1st of Statement of Expectations on the 1st of the 7th, 2004. Now, that goes to the fact that in 5 Minister's expectations, 1C is determined that a council should determine applications, development applications for which is a consent authority, in brackets, including DAs determined by the local planning panel, as soon as practical, whichever is practical and whichever is the lesser of the council's previous financial year average, or an average of, for the period July 2004 to 2005, 115 days. Now, the report that's been put before you by, firstly, the recommendation after I raised this was that the panel is of view that consideration of development would not otherwise come before it is beyond its remit, and that such DA as a matter of council's operational manager and the advice of the Director of Communities and General Manager be sought regarding the above. Now, I can understand why you made that decision, because
I raised it and you knew nothing about what was the position of the resolution. I think that the report that's now come forward is saying that, and quoting situations about the various planning directions that I referred to, and it makes two significant conclusions. It, number one, says that the direction 4.43 of the panel is, it says in the third paragraph, it is noted on only applicable development application in accordance with Schedule 1. My submission is that's not right, and it can't be right, because 4.43 is out of the direction on the 22nd of, out of the direction in 2022. There's nothing in the subsequent directions that overrides that, and to say that Schedule 1 applies is creating retrospective legislation, which the Interpretation Act doesn't allow. So I think that's incorrect. It does go on to say, in relation to 22, a local planning panel is subject to direction and control of the matters relating to the panel's procedures. And that's basically quoting what's in the direction, but also quoting what's out of the Act in relation to 2.177. So my submission is that the General Manager and the Director of Planning have come to a conclusion of not enacting the resolution of the Council. Now, I don't think they can do that. I think they must put it forward. And if they don't, there's other places it can be dealt with, quite seriously dealt with. It hasn't been put forward. It's not put forward at this meeting. You've decided in the last meeting that it wasn't in your remit, and I can understand why you've done that. My suggestion to you is that it is within your remit because of the resolution of Mr May and because of the way the Act works and what he's done. Now, I'm not privy to what was said by the previous panel and the discussions with the General Manager, but it was all in the light of the situation of DAs getting to a situation of being processed in a reasonable time. And Mr May's attitude was to bring this back, that there was a list. He hasn't said that you've got to determine them, he's just brought a list. And then what happens is, because of the direction on the 22nd, in 2022, you have a situation where you would look at a list and you would see whether you, in your experience, decide that it's unreasonable delays in excess of 180 days, and you have the right to call them in for 4 weeks for them to create a report. Now, that's a reasonable situation to occur. Now, a lot of this has gone on in the previous resolutions at this same meeting on the 7th of August and on the last panel meeting is in relation to appeal times. Now, I think a lot of people are not realising how appeals work, so that in the time that an applicant's got within which to appeal. It was altered it used to be 12 months, it was altered in COVID, it was changed to 6 months, it was altered in COVID to 12 months, it's gone back to 6 months, and that's a period that runs from, you only get an opportunity from deemed refusal, and deemed refusal is either after the 40 days if it's a normal DA or 60 days if it's integrated. So within that period of 6 months after that, there's a right to appeal. Now, if this list of 180 days from lodgement came to you, you would see whether matters have been appealed, you would see where matters have not been appealed, but probably could still be appealed. And therefore, you know, I just think the decisions of what it is incorrect. The only thing I wish to say about 6.4 is it's quite astounding that there's a couple of applications in there of, one's over 1,000 days, one's 700 and something odd days. Given the direction from the Minister, I think you, for your own protection, should be making some direction in relation to those. I note that the Council says, the report says they're going to bring them back at a certain time, but there's an obligation on you that I think you should make some direction.
Okay. Thank you. I think we've heard enough. Unless there's any further questions or comments from the panel, we'll need to consider what you've had to say. Thank you very much for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you, sir.
There being no other items on the agenda, I can declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance, staff and others.